What's up? We're live. All right. So welcome to the, let's call it the 248th episode of the Georgia Farm Bureau Georgia Prep Sports Drive for the GHSA state title. We've had a busy month of June. We were at the 7-on-7 last week. Still been trying to work out some of these audio issues, but hopefully everything sounds good. Today we're just going to talk about some of these recent commitments. It is the GHSA dead week, but things are still exceptionally busy, and I think July, from what we've been seeing, a lot of rising seniors are planning their commitment dates and making it an event out of it, and so we're going to see a lot of those pieces fall into place. So the news today, though, that I want to start off with is the commitment of Trajan Greco to Georgia Tech. He is from Mill Creek. He is a two-way player, does a really good job in that secondary at cornerback. That's where he's going to play at the next level, but I think similar to what we've seen with Mill Creek with some of their two-way stars, he's going to do a lot offensively. They will need him for that production. He's also an exceptional basketball player, and that is a huge commitment from Georgia Tech. His other offers, he had 27 total: North Carolina, Kansas. Looked like it was really between North Carolina and Georgia Tech. We saw Ashton Woods out of Walton commit to he is the number 16 edge rusher in the country, number 29 overall prospect, and his commitment makes him the highest rated player in this 2024 class. You have Kobe Young. That was the big commitment last week out of Holy Cross, New Orleans, a 3-star, 4-star in some recruiting sites, wide receiver, 5'11", 180 pounds, really explosive playmaker, and he's the number 9 overall prospect out of Louisiana. Also in the month of June, they had Jordan Floyd, Parkview offensive tackle, 6'6", 295 pounds, a multi-year starter. You look at what Parkview's done offensively the last few years with Kyer Spain, one of the few running backs that achieved over 100 rushing yards every single game last season. Despite all that firepower Parkview has with Mike Matthews and company at the receiver position, a big part of that is the offensive line play. Jordan Floyd anchors that group at the tackle, so he's tech-bound as well. They had Traylon Maddox out of Parkview, Jordan Floyd's teammate. He committed back on June 13th. We saw Traylon up close and personal at the 7-on-7, and he is going to be a really interesting player to watch this year. You have Kyer Spain. He's a workhorse back. He can have those 200-yard rushing games against anyone. He can take 20, 25 carries, but you add Traylon Maddox to the backfield with him. He has the running ability, and then he has a big frame, 6'1", 205 pounds. He looks like a strong safety in that backfield. He runs like a receiver, and he can pick up big yards and make big plays. I think that's a great commitment for Georgia Tech. He had one of the better catches we saw in the finals to lift them over Mill Creek, and that was on a great wheel route So I really like Parkview this year. Traylon Maddox and his teammate Jordan Floyd both committing in the last couple of weeks. Some of the out-of-state ones, Georgia Tech got Jaden Matthews out of Seguro, that's in Scottsdale, Arizona. He committed back on June 17th. He is the number 18 prospect in Arizona. They had William DePepe, 6'6", 230 pounds, edge rusher, commit in May. And then a quarterback, Graham Knowles, out of South Lake Carroll High School, back on June 18th. He is the number 150 rated player in Texas. We know how good you have to be in that range. There's a ton of players. They have double the population of Georgia. Then David Prince out of Glenn Academy High School, tight end, 6'4", 220 pounds. He committed on June 13th. And then the other big ones last week, Luke Harpring out of Marist, 6'3", 210 pound athlete, a great family of athletics. He's got sisters. He's got his dad, Matt Harpring, the Georgia Tech legend, and Utah Jazz great. And so thought that was interesting to add Trajan and Greco to that group, and that's going to put Tech, without Trajan, they're at the number 25 overall team in the college football recruiting rankings for 2024. That will probably bump them up. Let's see who they will move past. They have a 186.96 rating. Arkansas is above them with 188. So they'll jump them. They'll jump Texas Tech. And then they'll probably be right behind Florida State, who has 193 rating. And in terms of the ACC, Pitt's doing well. North Carolina is currently also slightly above Tech, and then Clemson. So the ACC schools that are above them: Clemson, North Carolina, Pittsburgh, Florida State. So they're number 5 in the ACC right now. That's a huge jump for them. I'm sure we'll see some more, but I really like those guys. We all mentioned play for great programs. They've all had an impact. Their season, they're ready to go, and we'll see how they do at Tech. One more thing about Tech I wanted to mention. Haynes King. He is the transfer from Texas A&M, and he was helping out Daniel and I actually the entire 7-on-7. I thought he was really impressive. We saw them at practice. He was basically outpacing the entire team in their conditioning team sprints. So really saw that, and he actually said, oh, this is nothing. Back at Texas A&M, we used to have to practice, go in and squat, then run, and then lift afterwards. So he was saying that really prepared him. Maybe that's the SEC compared to the ACC, but he's in great shape. He has experience, and I enjoyed kind of watching some of the Georgia schools that were in our event with him, because he comes from, I think he did play in Texas or Louisiana before he went there. I think it was Texas. So he didn't know who the teams were, but when Sandy Creek, for instance, went out there, he was like, wow, that team's really athletic. And so he could recognize that, and I was like, yeah, they won the football and basketball state title this year. You do that, kind of says how athletic your program is in school overall. And then I was like, that's where Calvin Johnson went too. So I was like, oh man. But then we also saw Sandy Creek was a little young defensively, and so I think just enjoyed kind of watching the play with him. But I think he's another example of what's going on at Tech. He's going to be competing for the starting job this year, and they've had transfers coming in as well. So what else happened this weekend? Let's see real quick. And this ties into what we're talking about with Luke Harpring. So I was watching highlights from the Archer 7-on-7 this weekend, and a player that saw making it touchdowns was Jude Cascon from Walton, and he actually was at Marist last year. He played in our Georgia Elite Classic the last 3 years. He is the class of 2026. He is an Adidas FBU All-American, tight end, H-back, and linebacker. And he has been making plays for the Walton varsity. So you had Hunter Teal and then Jude Cascon, who was considered basically a freshman phenom last year for Marist. And that's just one more playmaker that Walton's going to have this season. I think the depth's exceptional. You look at them last year compared to this year, there's definitely more depth. They returned Jeremy at quarterback. They got Hunter Teal back at the tight end. You had Jude Cascon. They've revamped the offensive line with Daniel Calhoun. They got Wyatt Sonderman back. A ton of receivers. Yeah, Jordan Bambride in that secondary. One of the clips I saw with him that was just probably one of the most impressive high school plays. I mean, that's something you see at elite colleges. He was covering I think they were in cover 2. He was covering the deep perimeter and going with the receiver on a fade route that was trying to clear the zone. The quarterback checked it down to the flats, and he came down and made the tackle so quickly that it turned into like a 3-yard gain. The amount of ground he was able to cover was truly impressive, and that's going to be a key for Walton this year, to having that secondary, a guy that can really tackle well and cover space and limit the big plays. Then you look at Walton's linebacking core. I think that might be the strength of the defense. You got Ashton Woods. You got, make sure I get this right, Wendell Gregory, a 4-star going to South Carolina. That's a huge combination right there. I thought last season Walton's defense did give up a lot of points in some games. They had some depth issues. Who was our guy that Georgia Southern? Aiden Jackson, yeah. When Aiden Jackson went down in the North Paulding game, that was a blaring weakness. They didn't really have a starting caliber guy to step in, but with Aiden Jackson healthy, I think their defense was pretty solid. And then the other thing Walton did last year incredibly well, they were one of the hardest tackling teams we had play in our games. They really were physical defensively. They had that attitude, and that's what you want to see when you're going up against some of these big-time 7A programs. Can you hit them in the mouth? Can you kind of just excite your team by making a big hit? And I think that's something Walton's definitely going to have, especially with Ashton Woods on that defense, who just committed to UNC. And then you have Makari Bada forward in the backfield, some other big-time playmakers, but I just thought that Cascone transfer, that's huge. I think he's going to be able to play a significant role this season. And Walton's creative enough to draw up some 2 tight end sets and really turn into a sophisticated attack. And that is going to be so key. So let's look at how they did in this Archer 7-on-7. Okay. So the teams that participated, you had Walton, South Paulding, Southwest DeKalb, Peachtree Ridge, Gainesville, Collins Hill, Archer, Mill Creek, Duluth, South Gwinnett, Gordon Central, and Discovery. So 14 teams right there. Walton ended up taking it all. They were undefeated, 4-0, the only team that obviously finished undefeated, but you had South Paulding 4-1, Southwest DeKalb 4-1, Peachtree Ridge and Gainesville also all 4-1. And I'm looking at the bracket right here. These were pretty big results for Walton. So they got the first round bye. Milton, they played Mill Creek, won 33-9. They matched up with Gainesville in the semifinals, took that one 32-18, and then South Paulding in the championship game, and that was a 31-14 win. So not only were they undefeated, they did not even have a close contest once the tournament bracket started. As for South Paulding, they beat Collins Hill, Archer in a close game, and then looks like they also had a first round bye. Southwest DeKalb, they ended up falling short to Collins Hill 14-12. It was a really close game. They beat Discovery 34-2 in the opener. And that's really hard to do. Holding a team to just 2 points, that means their offense didn't score a single point. The only reason Discovery got 2 points is because they stopped you, and that could happen on the last play or the final minute when you're just trying to run it out. So basically a shutout. So it's a good tournament right there. We saw Milton take first in the UGA 7-on-7 that had a ton of teams. That's a great sign for the Eagles, and I think what some of these results are showing is 7A football this year. It's going to be something to behold. It is incredible. And I went on with the last three guys to do a podcast last night. We're talking 7A football. That's going to air, I believe, on Wednesday. Their good friend, John Morgo and Daniel Bolton. And the question they asked was, is it Buford versus 7A this year? And it absolutely is. It was last year also. Buford is a program with obviously 13 state titles, but it's also a program that has had ridiculous, pretty much unrelenting population growth throughout that. They were attempting to be the first school to win a state title in every single classification last season when they moved up to 7A. That's the only classification they have not won yet. And this is the last year because we're going down to 6A after it. So this is the opportunity this season. It was last year as well. And they have, obviously, Daniel Raiola coming in now, who is going to be the best quarterback that has played for Buford in terms of the recruiting. They've always had the backs, they've always had the offensive linemen, the defense, the defensive linemen, but adding the number one quarterback, that makes them pretty much on par with a school like IMG Academy, where every single position is filled by someone that's going D1. And quarterback's obviously a really important position to have that. Buford's had college quarterbacks, but no one in this tier of recruiting. So can Buford take 7A this year? I think the big game to watch is going to be their first Georgia matchup of the season. That's going to be week 3 against North Cobb, who I think has a really good secondary. They've played Buford really well the last, I think, 3 seasons. Those games have always been close, and that secondary is going to be so huge against this Buford offense. We know they're going to be able to run the ball well, but if you can just at least match up with their top receivers, make it difficult for Buford to pass the ball, try to make them one-dimensional. Normally, when you're playing Buford, you would say we want them to try to pass the ball because running the ball was always their strength. I think this year with Dylan at quarterback, you might have to force them to run in some situations and not give up the passing, which he's going to be able to do for sure. But I think if you have a good secondary and a physical front that isn't going to just give up 5 yards on a handoff, I think you can match up defensively. That's going to be the key, and I think North Cobb will be the first test to show us exactly what 7A is going to look like this year. All right, let's go to some other commitment news real quick. Talked about Georgia Tech. Let's see if there were any more recent ones over the weekend. Looks like Cedar Grove's quarterback C.J. Colson. When did he say he's going to announce?
July 6th.
July 6th. All right. Do you know where he's split on right now? That's E.J. Colson.
No, I have no idea.
Okay, let's see. But yeah, he's going into his junior year. So that, I mean, we've been talking about the seniors that are scheduling out their commitments. That's interesting that he's doing it heading into his junior season. That's such a, but I think it also indicates that a school might be really high on him and see him as a guy that's going to be able to help shape the future class by kind of generating that buzz before the season starts. Right now, it looks like he has 13 offers: Arkansas, Charlotte, Cincinnati, Florida Atlantic, and some others. Let's see if he's been on any recent visits. Four-star quarterback, 4.0 GPA. Had 2,900 passing yards last year, 500 rushing, 67% completion percentage, just 4 interceptions, and 40 total touchdowns. That's going to be at Byron Middle School, July 6th, 7 p.m. Mark your calendars for that. Let's see. So he hasn't, I haven't seen any visits. Oh, here we go. Okay, his teammate was at UCF. That's Carl Jenkins. And he tweeted on June 10th, he said, EJ to CJ. So he's saying, okay, maybe he might be my future teammate. So I guess UCF is on the board for him. All right, let's look at some others real quick. All right, so Najee was saying that Gainesville cornerback Zion Ferguson, one of the top prospects in the state heading into the season, he decommitted from LSU, is this right? And then flipped to North Carolina. Wow. And so that was yesterday. 6-foot cornerback. Great playmaker for Gainesville last year. We know how huge that breakout season was for them. To get back in the finals, he had 38 total offers, and we talked about where North Carolina is right now in terms of the ACC. They're at the top. They've had a tremendous recruiting class, and month of June, they're the number 15th overall ranked right now. Obviously, that's Coach Mac Brown over there, and let's look at some of the Georgia guys they have. There'll be Zion Ferguson, who is now the highest rated in this class of 2024, number 38 player in Georgia. They got Ashton Woods last week, 6'3", 210-pound linebacker. They got Andrew Rosinski from Creekview, an offensive tackle that was earlier this year. You have Jaden Patterson from Mill Creek. He committed in late April. He's a safety, 6'1", 170 pounds. West Forsyth, oh, that's West Forsyth, North Carolina. Desmond Jackson. You had Aiden Banfield. He's going to either play, I think, center or guard, but he's from Mill Creek. He was a starter last year. He committed back in April. And that's it from the state of Georgia. But that's a big flip for them with Zion Ferguson. A very quick, great cover cornerback that can make some serious plays. He'll be a huge playmaker to watch for this year for Gainesville. And speaking of Gainesville, let's look at them real quick because I've been hearing a lot of buzz from what they might look like this year. They did lose some of their top playmakers. Darius Cannon, he's at Kentucky now. He was such a valuable piece for them last year. But I didn't realize their quarterback, Baxter Wright, he's going to be a senior this year. Oh, sorry. He's going to be a senior this season. I actually thought he was a senior last year for some reason. But yeah, let's look at their offense real quick. So Baxter Wright last season, 3,343 passing yards, 40 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 73% completions. That is incredible efficiency right there. He also had 563 rushing yards and 9 touchdowns. And if you've ever watched Baxter Wright play, he is back and forth. So if he ran for 563 yards, he probably took 1,000 yards to get there. He makes so many guys miss. He's such an exciting player to watch. The big question mark will be who's going to take over in the backfield. I'm sure they'll be fine in that department, but Naeem Cheeks, he was a huge workhorse for them last year, nearly rushed for 2,000 yards, 20 touchdowns. So he accounted for 20 of the 34 touchdowns last year. Baxter, the other 9, so 29 of the 34. It was just a sophomore. Kylan Hall had 3 touchdowns, and then they also graduate Marquise Ross, who had 2. So they'll be looking for a new star in that backfield, and then offensively, that's going to be the big question mark. They returned Sky Niblett at tight end, who was a touchdown machine. He had 11 touchdowns, 450 receiving yards. And so 30 catches, 11 touchdowns. That's really good efficiency, and it shows exactly how he was used last year. But then accounting for all the yards, getting them down the field, was Darius Cannon and Trey Reese, who had each of them had about 800 receiving yards, and then combined for Reese had 12 touchdowns, Darius had 9. So they do lose some skill players. Defensively, thought they did well last year. I mean, they were clutching the big moments for sure. Produced a lot of turnovers. We'll see how their secondary is going to look, but I think Gainesville will definitely be back this year to be a big-time contender in 6A. Hold on one sec. Okay, so Lacey Daniel was at Milton as well yesterday. Yeah, I think I did retweet this. So there was about 140, 150 guys out there for the showcase. And this is Austin Cook. He's going to be a freshman, right? Freshman from Gainesville, 6'1", 215 pounds already. He's looking sharp in his Twitter profile with that Gainesville suit on. He got the red jacket, black tie. If you've seen how Coach Niblett shows up to games, he's always decked out. So he's another FBU All-Star. He competed in the Georgia Elite last year. And watching his 40 right now. He's moving well, so I think Gainesville is going to have a ton of guys coming out, especially after their run to the finals. They do have a good senior class returning, and the key is going to be Baxter Wright. Is he going to be able to have another 3,300-yard passing season? I think so, and they'll be really creative in their offense. As you know, they were undefeated last year until that Hughes game. So let's see. Go over a few more commitments real quick. Okay, just in earlier today, we mentioned Trajan, but Donovan Thompson from Meadow Creek High School, 6'4", 302-pound tackle, just committed to Maryland. He is the number 100 offensive tackle in the country, number 130 player in the state. Meadow Creek actually had a really strong showing in our 7-on-7, making it to the, I think, quarterfinals. And I was texting, that was day one. Coach Wofford said, "Can't believe we're still in this thing." I think they had 2 of their linebackers were unable to make it. They had a conflict in their schedule, and then I think their starting running back, and they still were able to have a great showing. So I think Meadow Creek's going to be a lot more competitive this year as one of those Gwinnett programs that's kind of more newly established than your Norcross and North Gwinnett's, but they've been bringing in a lot of talent. Could see a similar trajectory as a Peachtree Ridge, who was able to burst to the scene early after opening up. His teammate at Meadow Creek, speaking of, Javon Bally, a 6 foot, 170-pound cornerback, committed to NC State yesterday. You have Jakari Williams out of First Presbyterian Day, private school in Macon. He's a quarterback. He committed to Syracuse. He's a 4-star, number 16 rated quarterback in the country, 41 in the state, and that's a big commitment for Syracuse. Let's see, anyone else from state of Georgia? Trey Linhart out of North Oconee, a 6'1", 200-pound safety, committed to App State yesterday. Oh, the big Tucker one we mentioned, C.J. Jackson, who's now the top-rated prospect in that Georgia Tech class, the 4-star. He committed yesterday to the Jackets. Ira Singleton, the 4th, out of Parkview, the edge rusher, he committed to Miami of Ohio, 6'5", 220 pounds. Watch out for him. We've seen, he's been actually getting a lot of production as a pass rusher for Parkview. I do remember seeing him balling out last year. And so that's it from this weekend. But yeah, as for this week, we will be back to our normal schedule of shows. We're going to start talking about an event that's going to happen later in July. I know it's the GHSA Dead Week right now, but there's going to be an alumni basketball event at West Forsyth High School in July. It's going to be Georgia Tech basketball alumni players against Georgia alumni. We'll get into it with the leadership of the event to kind of see what foundations they're benefiting. I know it's going to be a charity event and is involved, I think, with scholarships, but we'll have a guest on for a short segment each week leading up to it. It should be some exciting guests, some faces from the Georgia and Georgia Tech program that have been big-time starters for them and stars. So it's going to be a star-powered event. We're going to learn a lot more about it in the days ahead, and then we'll also be preparing for our media day in July. But that's all I have for you guys right now. I got to get on a call momentarily, but we will be back tomorrow with me and Najee, underrated and overlooked. We'll probably be touching more on Georgia Tech and some of these other commitments, as well as potentially the College Baseball World Series. We've been talking about how good the SEC has been. I think it's going to be an interesting Game 3, though. You had LSU coming off an emotional 11-inning win over Wake Forest to get into the finals. They take Game 1, and then Florida just absolutely destroyed them in Game 2. It's one of those games that just runs away from you. I think they were so relieved to win Game 1. Florida just was probably extremely mad about losing Game 1. They just came out and dominated. So can LSU bounce back and win Game 3? I think will be very exciting. So we'll talk about that a little bit and much more, but thank you so much for joining us. Hope you guys have a good week.
Our mission has always been to support Georgia farmers. That's why we created Georgia Farm Bureau Mutual Insurance Company. providing financial protection that farmers needed. While this remains the same today, we've grown to protect all Georgians through home, auto, and life insurance. From the very beginning and into the future, we stand for every Georgia community.
We are all Farm Bureau.